So we just got done receiving another week of Payday content in the form of an event, and aside from the spaghetti code we've come to expect from our beloved bank robbery turned Lovecraftian eldritch horror franchise, it appears that most of the community are actually relatively happy with the event, and there's little to no controversy to speak of. I noticed this very apparently. It seems, looking back over past events, that not one was without contention, even the best ones. The original Crime Fest 2014, whilst excellent and bringing back a fan favourite character, was soured for many as a result of John Wick's edition. The hype train was again lauded for great content, but criticised for its execution, as it was contingent on people spending collective large amounts of money on the game and DLC to unlock content. Plus the generally regarded as less than satisfying completely Overkill pack, a fact even later acknowledged by Overkill themselves. Crime Fest 2015, well, I think it goes without saying what the problem was there. Even Hoxton's Housewarming, which added so much content, was criticised for some of the problems brought with its release, and the further insistence to tie the universe into the John Wick one. The search for Kento came under fire for the papercraft content and lack of real content overall. Lock and Load's heist and character additions were criticised and considered lazy by many, and finally, even this year's Spring Break couldn't escape its share of disdain from many parts of the community. But as I've already alluded to, Icebreaker has had by far the least scorn of any Payday event so far, and so I thought it might be interesting to conduct somewhat of a post-mortem on the event. Let's look at what went right with this event and how Overkill should look to proceed for future events in the game, and others from now on. First, we should look at the content itself. We, as a community, received a heister with her perk deck, weapons and melee, a handful of masks including the Golden Wolf mask, a new stealth possible heist, and a new game mode. So what was particularly good about any of these things? Well, the heister was simply a bonus for most. If, like me, you own the Switch version of the game, then joy isn't anything exactly new to you. But personally, I enjoy everything about the character much more on the PC version. Her perk deck is a lot more useful with the better controls, and as it's my preferred platform, I've had increased exposure to her, so I've enjoyed her voice lines a hell of a lot more. Overall, she's a totally acceptable addition with a fun deck that covers a niche not really explored before, that being pseudo-stealth. Shacklethorn Auction has a few things about it that make it particularly exciting for the Payday fans. First of all, following their recent trend of ramping up the story, no doubt leading towards Payday 2's inevitable swansong and finale, the mission provides lore advancement. Furthermore, it gives something that had previously been exclusive to Payday the heist missions: different clothes! Yes, it's a subtle and very small addition, but it's often cited by fans just how much the raincoats on Green Bridge or the stealth gear in the Diamond Heist help the atmosphere of the whole mission, so props to Overkill for hearing this loud and clear and decking out the whole gang in snazzy tuxedos for this one. Very fitting. But the final thing, which I would be remiss to ignore, is that this is the first heist where players can choose between stealth and loud since the classics have been added, and the first new mission of this type since the Scarface Mansion heist, released at the end of 2016, approximately a year and a half ago. This plays a huge role in why this event has been so popular, I think. Overkill needed only develop one quality heist and allow it to be done in both stealth and loud to draw players of both styles back into the game, whilst giving many more of their less decided players the replayability a game like this needs. So this is something they should take note of. I'll come back to this later on. Finally, we have the new game mode, Holdout. It somewhat goes without saying why this was so helpful for the event, but as I've already mentioned, Payday is an inherently repetitive game. If you were to beat every heist in the game first time once over, it would take you less than 100 hours for sure, maybe even less. But there are people in the community like Connor Shaw with over 3,000 hours in the game, and I myself have sunk about 1,700 into it, and I'm pretty sure most of that time isn't simply failing heists. Since the game is so repetitive, it takes a certain type of person to enjoy it, and playing the same missions over and over really isn't for everyone, so it's absolutely key that Overkill make note of how simply adding slightly new ways to play old favourite maps can freshen up a game that gets stale for old and new players after a given length of time, in a way that is very refreshing and indeed exciting. So, allow me to articulate and answer the two questions I've posited here. What makes Icebreaker the greatest triumph for Overkill, and what should they learn from it? Firstly, here is what I believe makes this event the greatest triumph: its length. This was the absolute key factor in this event's success. Whilst past events have been 7 days and sometimes even 10, the Icebreaker event was just 5 days long. Following Overkill's favourite 1 day on, 1 day off pattern, this left us with 3 days of content, 2 days without. In the past, we've had events with 4 days of content, 3 days without, or even 5 days with, 5 days without. The 10-day events in particular can feel very padded out to last longer, and although we usually got more content, 2 heists as opposed to 1, etc., it often ended up feeling a little empty, and while there isn't an obvious majority of content, it can hurt the overall reception of the event. The 7-day events were steps in the right direction, cutting down the amount of content but non-content too, and I do think this year's spring break worked very well in this regard, though that's a topic for another time if people are interested. However, 5 days is simply the perfect sweet spot for this. 3 days of content feels like just enough, especially due to the clear high effort put into each day, and for those who will complain about days without, well, there are only 2 days without direct updates. That is incredibly generous and easily the best ratio of content to none so far. Furthermore, the styling of this event made it so successful. Overkill's commitment to themes have been shown in the past with the weird papercraft thing in The Search for Kanto among others, but this year it's become very apparent just how much they're willing to do this. Again, this year's spring break was a very obvious step towards this under the conspiracy blog guide, and now we have an auction themed event leading nicely into both the lore and this event's heist. The addition of a cocktail each day was simply the icing on the cake and helped to solidify the theme of the event to a T. They got this right for once. Additionally, it's worth noting a few smaller things that were, in my opinion, very helpful to the event overall. This includes Overkill having listened to the community on the outfits, a heist which appeals to everyone in some way, a character with a perk deck which has multiple playstyle beats, a live stream which was actually very enjoyable and supplemented the main content well, a funny programming joke, replayability, no 4 mask days, no 1 weapon days, and this cool in Space Invaders thing. Oh, and of course, the surprise nature of this event. It wasn't one we were expecting. Overall, Overkill actually did a great job here. By confining the event to 5 days, they allowed the content to be more concentrated and contain far less filler, whilst actually having to put in less work than usual. After all, the Joy character was recycled content, and whilst the holdout mode features some new additions in Locke's voice lines and a HUD element, it utilises maps already existing for some easy replay value at little cost, both of which leave the only real major brand new addition to be Shacklethorn Auction. This likely made the event easier than usual for the Overkill staff, allowing the fans to be happy and Overkill to have to bear a burden at least slightly lighter than normal in these events. So what should they learn? Well, it's a little tough to say, and I certainly don't think all events should be exactly like this in future. I fully expect Crime Fest later this year to be longer than 5 days, but there are definitely some more important lessons to learn here. Overkill. Give yourself less room for mistakes. The more concentrated the content is, the less chance there is that a small thing will go wrong. And if it does, people will likely be much more forgiving on 1 major bug in 5 days than 3 or 4 in 10. This is evidenced by the lack of outrage over the Shacklethorn bug where no payout for extra loot was given. You should definitely continue to theme your events heavily. It's clearly obvious you don't need me to tell you this, as you've obviously already figured it out with this year's spring break and this event itself, but it's definitely something that needs commending, and I think you should keep it up. Target your content to a broad demographic. Seriously, this has to be the biggest thing. I play Payday mainly with a single friend, and he enjoys stealth games a lot. I like them too, but I prefer FPS games and other such action. This makes Payday a lot of fun for us, and the heists we enjoy together the most are the ones with the choice. It's not like I resent stealth or he resents loud-only heists, but having the choice, even when loud plays out extremely similarly, is very nice. Alternatively, if you really don't want to have a heist have the option, Spring Break again offers a good option with the 1 forced stealth heist, 1 forced loud heist. So that about covers it all. Honestly, I do think Overkill are moving in the definite right direction here with the content this year, and Icebreaker is undoubtedly my favourite event yet, but I simply wanted to make this video to analyse the success of this event in a little more detail from the perspective of someone who enjoys the game but has taken several breaks as a result of content droughts, etc, etc. I just hope for the future that Overkill will present us with more content of this ilk, and far, far less like 2015's Crime Fest. Thanks for watching.